everybody for joining. I know Linda, did you want to kick off with a few words? Would you like? Absolutely. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and we do have a quorum, so thank you all for participating. This is our third second in-person meeting, our fourth meeting. Many of you all were able to attend, hopefully virtually as well as in person for our community meetings that we had last Monday night and Tuesday. To get through into our, I'm just going to go ahead and get started quickly so we can go ahead and go through our programming for this evening. As you can see, we have 6 big topics for you. The first one I want to start off with is open meetings compliance. And so we had a complaint on our Open Meetings Act regarding our breakout sessions. So the complaint submitted a statement regarding the breakout sessions, both in person or in virtual, were in violation of the Open Meetings Act. We were unaware of this when we had the breakout sessions. We had been doing breakout sessions for a very long time in various situations and scenarios, but apparently, literally days before we had our meeting, there was a ruling for city. Chevy Chase. One of the Montgomery County cities actually had their council go into a breakout session to discuss matters, and that's when the violation came up, and there was a finding. We were unaware of that. Literally, it was a matter of days, and as soon as we found out, obviously we had corrective action. And so we did take immediate action with that finding and shared that with you, as you know, with the task force, that we are no longer going to be holding breakout sessions once we were made aware of that. And we did meetings and training to new task force members. Hopefully many of you came. We did this as an online training with Amanda Minehill, who's from our Office of Law. So Open Meetings and Compliance Board decided that there was this violation. Even with all of those things in play, they did decide that there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act, and they have issued the following corrective actions: that a task force member will summarize the board's opinion, and then a majority of the task force members will have to sign the opinion letter to acknowledge the receipt of the opinion. So with that, Joan has agreed to summarize the board's opinion, and then a letter will be passed around for the majority of the membership. Do you want me to come up? Sure, that'd be great. Just thank you so much. Do you think some here? Yeah, because brochure.
You all received a copy of the information about the task force, and what we already heard is a pretty good summary. But on July 18th, the Open Meetings Compliance Board conducted a separate opinion on a different case, which was that Montgomery County case, that body had violated the Open Meetings Act when it convened a quorum in open session and then split up into small breakout groups to discuss public business simultaneously. This group was unaware of the opinion because it was only 4 days later when we had our task force meeting, where we indeed also broke out into small group things to engage for about 15 minutes in simultaneous discussion. And as you remember, we all came back together and reported out on what had been discussed in those groups. Following that July 22nd meeting, a complaint was filed with the Open Meetings Compliance Board, alleging that the task force had violated the Open Meetings Act. And I know I was one of the people that attended the August 25 Open Meetings training, where the Howard County Office of Law said that they, in fact, were unaware of the change that had occurred 4 days before our meeting, and are now actually changing all of their suggestions and requirements to all other boards and commissions. So the Compliance Board recommended the task force on the corrective measures that we've done by agreeing to no longer have breakout sessions and by having the training on open meetings. And we're not going to do that anymore. And so apparently, as Linda said, someone who's not staff had to just tell you all that you already had read in this. And now, we're gonna pass around and hopefully we can get the majority, if not everyone to sign and agree that we were bad and we won't do it anymore.
Was, you all, I'm really sorry that you have to be the ones to sign, because we understand that was not your decision. We didn't know, we're sorry that we put this task force in that position. It's not something that was well known. We had got opinions from Office of Law. We had conducted these types of breakout groups before. Our understanding was you could do a breakout as long as you came and reported back what was said in the breakout, then that was totally, allowed, under open meetings. So this new opinion, as you said, was just a few days, in the changes of what the decisions and opinions from the compliance board were. So again, I apologize as the director and, I apologize for our staff and DPs in the county for this. And so, thank you so much for your understanding. Sarah has the, open meetings, compliance board letter. There are no lines for signatures. They actually just told us to sign it as is like that. And then this will be sent back to the compliance board via email and filed away. So, any questions regarding that from members? All right, thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer. Thank you. Don't need that form.
No. So actually, just prior to these, several of these are slides we'll go through very quickly, but one other item that I wanted to share, because we will be talking about meeting minutes this evening as well. So one of the changes tonight is that this is being broadcast live, so we do have the equipment in here, and that recording, very similar to our WebEx meetings, that recording will serve as our meeting minutes as well. So moving forward, we will have recordings as our meeting minutes. And looking at this, just a quick reminder, we do have these in the back of the room of why we're here, that it is an executive order, that our role is to evaluate and make recommendations, that we are not making the changes ourselves. And even the recommendations, there's some idea behind that, that they're not going to be, as you mentioned, the language of the zoning, referrals going out, but there's still going to be work on them. So there will be components of it that will have additional research, but it's recommendations and actions to move forward. Similarly, this is the vision for Newtown recommendations. This is what came out of our first two meetings of just identifying what it is we will be looking and comparing every action that we talk about and comparing it back to. So a few things as our follow-up from the last meeting, and you'll see there's X's on here because this is not the live surveys any longer, but we had gone through during our preserve, strengthen, enhance, or transform discussions, and have gone through those first few questions. Should we keep, remove, or modify the section of zoning regulations that guide the creation of a new town district? And our results were fairly split on this one. Does the definition of credited open space in the new town zoning code reflect its current uses? And we mostly said yes on this one. And then should we preserve, strengthen, enhance, or transform the definition of credited open space in new town zoning? And this really came through as strengthening. So while we said that the definition accommodates it, we should also look at strengthening that language. So that was our quick recap from last time. And so then with that, our prior meeting minutes and approvals, and there is actually, as many times as we have all looked at this, what we will be approving this evening, and your motion will say that, is it is task force number 3 meeting minutes, which have been distributed, and that was the recording, because we did have that as a WebEx platform. And again, as I mentioned, meeting minutes moving forward will be recorded. So as we've mentioned before, if you agree, you can raise your hand. Somebody will need to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as distributed for task force meeting 3, and someone will need to second it. So is there a motion to approve task force number 3 meeting minutes as distributed in the recording?
So moved.
Thank you, Michael. Michael has moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sharon, for the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving task force number 3 meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Thank you for approving meeting minutes. And Ashley has also put her hand up. So Ashley is online. She had something come up where she is in transit. So we did make that concession to be online for this evening. So just as a reminder, we do have these questions and topics that we're looking at, and this is a compilation of questions that the county has received and information, as well as what came out of homework assignments. Also, you'll see some things in here for this evening's discussion that directly came from the public meeting. So we did last meeting talk about creating another new town district and defining accredited open space. Tonight, we have the 3, and you will note that what went out in the homework and what we've seen previously, we flipped the first and the last. So in all of the homework, the first question was reviewing the original petitioner role. We have flipped that with incorporating the moderate income housing unit regulations, because we're very fortunate to have Kelly with us tonight as the director who can speak specifically to this as well, and we'll be guiding, we'll be talking with Jeff, presenting with Jeff also. And so we didn't want her to sit through 2 hours of meeting to get to her topic. So we did just flip-flop those 2 because of that, of having somebody here as a guest to be able to help us with this. And then the managing density, so be part of our conversation as well. And next meeting, we'll go through the final questions, and then we'll move into the recommendations. So right now in this preserve, strengthen, enhance, transform, we're really identifying what do we want that action to be. We're not yet at the recommendations portion. There were a number of things that did come out of last meeting, and so we always want to make sure that we capture that and we talk through it so you're aware. There was information requested that will really be pertinent for getting into the recommendations component. And you can see on the screen here the new town district element. So there are a number of questions that came up. So even as we didn't have a defined what to do next, because it was very split between the different QSET components, some of the things came up of, should we add a purpose statement to the district? How much land remains within the county that could even be developed into a new town district? And has there been a trust to build new towns? So those are great pieces, and information like that tonight. I know reading through all the homework, there was a desire to have some more information as well. So even through that, as you have that, share that, so that when we get to the actual recommendations pieces, we're able to go through that material and make sure that we have it, so we can make those informed decisions as we get to recommendations. Likewise, the credited open space element, how much land is categorized within each type of open space, and who owns the open space in the new town district. And so this got back to, which playgrounds are counted as open space or not open space, and which parks are, and which sports amenities and components like that. So breezing through, we've all seen this now a number of times of what our overall schedule is. We are here at the October meeting. Just 1 week ago, we had the public meeting. Had a lot of great information come through that. Had about 50 people or so in person. I think we had about 40 online. So, and I know we had some repeats, but it's a great number of individuals. A lot more surveys being filled out, a lot of comments received, and that information will still be coming out, and really we'll have a section of it next meeting because the survey isn't even closed yet. But we're doing great with getting results. So that's wonderful to see. We've talked about the schedule for receiving materials, so everyone knows they'll get the meeting notes or the meeting recording shortly after this. And then there will, of course, be another homework assignment. So as we've talked about before, what we're really doing, we talked about the major discussion elements that was presented in September. We've been walking through these major elements individually. We'll do this tonight as well with the next set of them. We'll pull out the pertinent pieces from those case studies so you can see how it relates back to each of the elements individually, not just the entire case study at once. And then we're gonna have that polling, the same thing we did last time with some polling of what do we think that next action should be. Keeping in mind that the actual recommendations will come during that next set of meetings, starting in December and moving forward. So just a quick reminder as we get into the discussions, what does preserve mean, strengthen, enhance, and transform? So it's really about, are we keeping it as it is? Do we need to make that language a little bit stronger? Do we need to add some more to it to enhance it, to further define it, or do we need to transform it completely? I just want to share one conversation I had with an individual at a public meeting. In talking about it, somebody who came in and shared with me, well, there's a lot of great things in this already, and why would we change certain things? And so I was sharing this earlier. I'm a huge fan of Walt Disney, not just Disney as what everything Disney stands for, but Walt Disney as the individual, the entrepreneur, the innovator, all of that. And you can see, similar to Columbia, you can see even with Disney that when Jim Rouse did this, he wrote things down. It was in his mind and he wrote things down. And he shared it with that next generation. And that next generation knew what he was saying, had those one-on-one conversations, and could read the documents and have had this conversation in his mind. But there's going to come another generation who's not going to have those conversations. And then another generation who may not have those conversations either. And so it's really important as we look at this, does what's written down reflect what the intention is if we don't have that knowledge generation to generation? So that's something to think about as we're looking at all of this, because there will come a point where we won't have people who have known Jim Rouse, who, as we get 3 generations down, 4 generations down, what's written is going to be what's understood. And the intentions behind it won't be there anymore. So keep that in mind as we're going through, really how that impacts on the preserve, strengthen, enhance, and transform components of those written documents. There we go. So again, tonight we've already talked about what we'll be discussing. From the homework perspective, rather than doing all of the homework review up front, we broke it out so when we get to each topic, we'll talk about what the consensus or major data points were on the homework, the case studies, and then we'll have that open discussion. So just a reminder on the case studies, we have the 3 other areas: Greenbelt, Maryland, Montgomery Village, Maryland, and Reston, Virginia. These were all selected based on the dates, the sizes, generally the history matching well with Columbia. So now what we really want to get through all of that first. We'll start with the very first question. Should moderate income housing units requirements apply to new town zoning? So from the homework, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff and Kelly as she'd like to share in as well. But from the homework, the conversations came back, and I looked at it really of yes with considerations, no, and onshore. So you don't see any yeses. Not of the homework assignments received, nobody said yes. We did have several say yes with considerations, a few saying no, and some saying onshore. A few things to note in here. A couple of the key elements that came through, so consideration only through redevelopment, and that was shared in more than one homework assignment, that only as areas are being redeveloped, maybe look at the MHIU requirements. To review it countywide to determine where supply and demand is occurring, really wanting some more information regarding what's going on in Columbia versus countywide. And then a notation of Columbia already has a legacy of the mixed housing types. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to walk through further information, to just share that, and then we can come back and talk about the polling and have discussions.
So Jennifer pointed out, there were a lot of questions about moderate housing program, what it is, what are the considerations, just trying to think through what the important context is for this program and how it relates to Columbia. So we put together some explainers about what an MIHU is, as well as some data, just to provide just context. So the moderate income housing unit program is an inclusionary zoning program that requires developers of new housing in certain zoning districts to sell or rent a portion of dwelling units to households of moderate income. MIHU uses Howard County's area median income to determine eligibility for For sale, MIHUs meet affordability for households making 80% area median income, depending on the size, of course. And then rental MIHUs meet affordability for households making 60% median income. So units required are based on percentage of all units in any given new development construction project and vary by zoning district. Typically, it's 10 to 15% requirement. So, for example, a project proposing 100 new units would be required to build between 10 to 15 units affordable to moderate income households, depending on the requirements of the given zoning district. So current moderate income unit requirements do not apply to Newtown zoning, except for downtown Columbia, following the downtown Columbia master plan. Downtown Columbia plan established recommendations for moderate income housing units to be built into downtown Columbia's revitalization, including at least 12 to 15% of residential units based on building height, must be designated as affordable and at MIHU rates. And developers may propose to exceed the minimum affordability requirement via the development rights and responsibilities. So we had a white paper that was conducted, and we pulled a quote from it that states that these regulations, meaning MIHU, do not apply to Newtown zone lands. The rationale for this exclusion was that Columbia was founded on the principle of providing mixed income housing, and thus the MIHU program was not needed for Newtown zone properties. There was also concern that Columbia may already have more than its fair share of modern income housing. The report also states that there's a need to determine the demand for modern income housing units versus the supply of such units throughout the county and in the sub-county planning areas. So it goes on to say, if an analysis demonstrates that a need for additional modern income housing units in Columbia and in Howard County, the issue of MIHU requirements should be discussed. So in summary, as such, the report on one hand acknowledges that Columbia has been doing a better job at providing housing for moderate income, but also recommends that a policy change may be needed if there's unmet. So the largest number of residents and housing units are in Columbia, or in the Columbia submarket. In the dark blue, you can see that Newtown zoning had the most number of sales in 2023 with 902. The map on the right comes from the Housing Opportunities Master Plan, which was concluded in 2021, showing that the boundary of the Columbia submarket right here to give you a sense of where it's looking at. It's not just exclusively looking at Newtown zoning, it's looking at Columbia as a whole, so Newtown is included in these numbers. So the housing data shows that Columbia's housing mix is 38% single-family detached, 27% townhome, and 35% apartments. Columbia has over 42,000 housing units with 67% owner-occupied and 33% renter-occupied. The average sale price is $372,000 compared to $475,000 for the and average market rent is about just under $2,000, which is slightly below the county average of $2,010. And additionally, the median year built is 1981, so it's actually the oldest of any of the submarkets. So between 2015 and 2018, more than 71% of homes that sold in Columbia were built more than 30 years ago. So you can see the gray bar there, those are indicating either dark gray is 50 plus years, 40 to 49 years, and then so on. So 71% of the homes were built more than 30 years ago compared to between 24 and 42% each other planning. This difference highlights that most for sale homes in Columbia tend to be older, which is part of the reason for why they also tend to be more affordable. However, the sales prices of these homes do not necessarily take into account repairs or upgrades that may be necessary given their needs. So, but essentially, older homes typically are associated with lower sale prices. So these charts shown here come from Maryland Department of Planning 2023 sales data. First chart here on the top has Newtown on the very far left, shows the average square footage of units sold within each of its. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, so the top left chart showing the average square footage of units sold within each of our county zoning districts. As you can see, a house sold within Columbia, Newtown, on average is about 1,650 square feet in size. Newtown produces some of the smallest homes in the county. It is on slightly larger than districts such as RA 15. So the RA 15, which is more where our townhomes and apartment zoning district is, it's slightly more than that, but it's only slight. Additionally, the chart below shows the average year of construction for a household in Columbia 1982. So again, this is sales data that we're getting. So again, reflecting just like the housing opportunity master plan, showing that the oldest housing stock is here. PPZ then took the sales prices and compared them to the square footage to determine the correlation in the linear regression model. So as you can see here, there is a strong correlation and relationship between the size of the home and the sale price. Essentially, the smaller the unit, the more affordable the price. Still showing. Sorry, guys. So additional sales data is shown in this map, where you can see that the yellow single-family detached homes can be found throughout the county, including Columbia. So there's primarily outside of Columbia, but also just a significant portion of the single-family detached homes. What is also noticeable is the orange dots, or townhomes, and the deep red dots, or condominiums, which are showing a strong concentration around inside Columbia. So this map here shows where the smallest and the largest homes are sold. The lighter indicates smaller, which you can see Columbia is more, but not exclusively, has more smaller unit sizes. Whereas with the darker, you also find that here in Columbia, especially more on the periphery. And as we saw earlier, smaller unit sizes can lead to greater affordability. So in 2023, 61% of homes, oh, sorry, that shows the, yeah, so later. So in 2023, 61% of homes that were sold for under $350,000 in Columbia were in Howard County were in Columbia. So highlighting its role in providing affordable housing. The lighter dots are where affordable housing sales have occurred, which you can see makes up the majority of Columbia. So this map shows the most rental, where most rental housing units are, they are located in Columbia along the Route 1 corridor. You can also see that there are very few rental options out in the rural areas. And primarily rental units are located in areas where there is about 20% or less home ownership. So previously I showed you sales data. So these charts here refer to rental units. For Newtown, the average rent price was about, for the county, was about $17,000. The average unit square footage was also about an average of 961 square feet. And this linear regression also shows that, of course, there's a correlation between the size of the unit and rent price. Columbia has a relatively high penetration rate of 59% among extremely low rent units that are housing families below 30% income. Despite this, extremely low.
Can you see the correlation?
Yes, that's right. There we go. Thank you. So despite this, extremely low and very low rent is not meeting demand for supply. And NIH targets 60% AMI for rent. So again, that's what this chart is essentially saying. So we see here extremely low rent. Yes, Columbia in the dark green is meeting a higher supply than any other submarkets that were studied in Howard County, but we're still not meeting the baseline. So multifamily square footage. Howard County's rental study provides the location of the rental units within the county, and this map depicts a range of average square footage. So as you can see, Columbia has some variability with units above 1,200 square feet, and some communities are below average 745 square feet. This map shows communities and labels them by year built. You can see that Columbia has some of the older rental communities prior. The yellow indicates that prior to 1978. And it also has some of the newest since 2016. And then monthly rents. Here's a comparison of where the higher and lower rents are located in the county. So you can see Columbia has, again, some variability with rents above 2,700 and also some rents below 1,300. So there are 66 multifamily rental communities in Columbia, including subsidized. Of the 14 subsidized communities in the county, 12 are. Columbia has 94% of the county's subsidized rental units. And then 2,600 rent restricted units serve households at 30 to 60% median income with a 0.3% vacancy. And then 400 plus rental units are planned in Columbia, 32% of the county's pipeline. And then 2/3 are affordable housing units, low income housing. And then finally, we just wanted to do look to see what other Newtown plan communities have implemented inclusionary zoning, what they have done. So Montgomery County's Montgomery Village has a moderately priced dwelling unit program, which applies to projects over 20 units. It requires 12.5 to 15% of these to be set aside into new developments as affordable to moderate income households. Greenbelt, Prince George's County actually does not have such a program in place for inclusive zoning. And then Reston, Virginia has the affordable dwelling unit program, which applies to projects over 50 units and uses the density-based calculation to determine the requirements starting base of 12.
Thanks. Let's first see if I can get rid of this point and
Yeah, sorry.
All right, well, we're gonna just leave that there, not really sure.
I'm looking at all this data
It's a lot.
and yeah, it's hard to absorb it all. And some of the stuff we've been discussing in the last couple of meetings, and I found myself asking myself the question, why do I care? I see a lot of Greenbelt, Montgomery Village, Reston. To me, they're all irrelevant. When I came here in 1970, I signed on to a program delivered to me by HRD and Mr. Rouse that, was Newtown zoning and was explained many times over the years, and demonstrated in the visitor center. But this was a partnership of Howard County government and the zoning department of Howard County government and HRD. And once the covenants were introduced and put in place, it became, everybody was subject to it. HRD was subject to it, the county was subject to it, zoning, so much so that the zoning people, Tom Harris and Jimmy Wanamaker and Cy Palmier worked hand in glove. There were never any hearings up at the county anytime anything new was being done. And as a part of that whole process, they specified the limitations on land usage and ratios of buildings on the properties. And, I'm told by people who were there that this is all locked in concrete. So if that's the case, what does Montgomery Village mean to me? What does Reston mean to me? What do any of these charts and graphs and whatever? Columbia pre-planned all those usages. We are satisfied, and as you indicated, we have more than our share of moderate income housing. Why do I care?
Well, we'll get to that with the question, because that might be the case of why do we care for Newtown zoning? But as far as why we look at other case studies, because we have been tasked, and we have those in the back of the room, through HOCO by Design, that there was a need and a desire by citizens in Howard County to take a look at Newtown zoning district, which is why we're all here for this task force. As far as one of the specifics on the it is very hard to say, MIHU, the reason we look at those case studies is because those all started as Newtown zoning districts as well. They've all gone through a progression in time. They've all had a period of time since they started. And as I mentioned with that example, is at some point, there will be a generation that doesn't know all that history, will not be intimately involved with that history. And this activity and this entire exercise is making sure that what we knew in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and each decade and generation moving forward, is it still relevant? And I know we've talked on the team many times of something very simple as a deck. What material should be used? Well, in the 1960s, composite material wasn't something that was affordable or readily available. Quite frankly, some of them, and I won't say all of them, but there are some companies, composite material is much more environmentally sustainable than using a wood deck. But what materials are we looking at? So as times change, we always need to ask ourselves why. And the answer may be, no, we don't want it. So let's go on to our next item here.
Can I just say one thing?
And I want to clarify something.
Sure. We'll do the one and then the other, and then we will go to the question.
I don't think it is set in stone. That's why we're here, right? But I think what you were saying is that it's set in stone, that what happened back with Rouse's time is it's it forever. I think we're saying it's not it forever, and we're considering making changes to it.
Well, it was also changed in 2010.
Right, it was already changed twice, so that's, yeah,
Absolutely.
So the one thing, you had a slide up there earlier that said that with the 2010 plan, 12 to 15% MIHU units were required, I believe. But I want to just let everybody know that there was a buyout clause as part of that as well. So let's not and I'm not saying anybody intentionally misled,
Right.
but there was a provision that allowed you to buy out of that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I don't think a lot have been built. And I think a couple thousand have been developed of the 5,000, so about half of the density is gone. So imposing that requirement now would, benefit the people that got the first bite at the apple, which I think we probably be. But, we just have to take that into account, that,
Who benefits otherwise?
Let's go to the question first and then we'll come back to the discussion.
Developer?
Greg and Karen, guys, Karen, I saw your hand up as well, and Nicole, we're gonna go to the question, and then once we have that, similar to what we did online, then we'll come back and have some more discussion, because it might be a fairly moot point if everybody says, if everyone concurs on an answer. So similar, you can either go on your phone and add in the www.menti.com, or you can scan. And this is a vote for discussion purposes. And then actually I'm gonna, I think everybody's got it up here. I need to switch out the screens. I even need to get things started on it. Wherever I'm doing these. Little things. Give 1 second and I'm switching on.
There's like no voters in this room.
I think actually, I don't know if you're in a spot where you can participate. If you were, then hopefully you got the screen. Okay. Okay. So as far as the should MIUG requirements apply to new town zoning, because we're not able to get rid of the little box up there, we have 0 people saying yes and 0, we have 1 unsure. 5 were saying no, and then several yes with considerations.
Some of us can't vote, if there's no bars in this room.
There's Wi-Fi.
Is there Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yes. Yes, thank you for bringing it. It's the public.
Coco Public or something like that. As the one unsure vote right now with kind of some implications on the vote, does anybody know a ballpark percentage of how many or what percentage of units are moderate income housing? Because like median sale price and stuff is great, but if it's the same house being sold,
For here, it's gonna be presented to you, so.
that'd be great.
I get away with just hanging out, right?
By the way, we're about to close.
No, absolutely.
So, I'm gonna show you why we care. So in 2024, the department awarded 55 new homes under the moderate income housing program. We also awarded 16 resales. Resales are important because units enter the program and they're in the program forever. So as a homeowner stays in their home 5, 7, 10 years, they then become a homeownership opportunity for another family. So that's really important.
who is us?
The county.
So you're with the county.
I mean, that, we started over. I am Kelly Simoneau. I'm the director of the Department of Housing and Community Development for Hartford County.
Okay, and you're here for what reason?
I am asked to be an expert to give background on the MIT program.
Just very quickly, because I mentioned Kelly.
Well,
I had mentioned Kelly was here earlier, which is why we had pushed this question first, that we had somebody who would be able to answer questions or help answer questions. So I'll let you do the
Yes,
formal.
that's okay.
promoting are 2 different.
Oh,
things.
I'm just voting.
Okay.
This is Kelly Simoneau, she's the Director of Housing and Community Development for Howard County. We wanted to have her here this evening because we are having this discussion on new town zoning, and we would be remiss if we did not discuss in-depth moderate income housing units and our MIHU, LIHU programs, and have someone who administers the programs discuss those programs with you all, and to be able to answer any questions you may have and how it would be applied to new town.
Otherwise, it would be me trying to answer their questions.
Correct. So that's why Kelly's here this evening.
And just to continue, currently the MIH program has 827 rental units. And that is 10 to 15% in any new development. Same for homeownership units. There's a homeownership component and a rental component. Regarding, and this data is available in our annual report, which is posted on the county's website. So in context, Jeff had shared things such as average house price and average rent. The average sale price of a moderate income housing unit in 2024 was $302,000. So when you look at your data and you see what the price of a market rate home is, ours was $302,000. The average income of a household that purchased that home in 2024 was $84,000. For the resale units, the average price was $282,000, and the average income was $71,000 for the household. For rental units, which Jeff also shared, was the average rent for an MIHU unit is $1,488. And the average household income ranged from 54 to 102. So what I just wanted to share with you in comparison to your data of Columbia versus the county, wanted to share some of the data that pertains to MIHUs in Howard County. The Moderate Income Housing Unit Program has been in effect in Howard County since 1996. That's why at the time did not apply to Columbia. Columbia was already here. So now this group and others within zoning and the county have the opportunity that as Columbia is redeveloped, do you want to see moderate income housing units in the redevelopment of Columbia or not? That's because it wasn't an option, because this happened in 1996, well after Columbia was established. The other thing I want to mention is that while Columbia has the majority of apartments and the majority of lower priced housing, because as Jeff's data showed, they're smaller and or older, and so therefore they don't compete with the McMansions. So it's just to give you data to make your comparisons. And if you are looking at providing housing for some of the people who work here in Howard County, particularly teachers, for example, a first-year teacher that makes, I believe, under the blueprint, is now up to $65,000 a year, they can afford a $282,000 house with help from the county, but they cannot afford a $500,000 house. So that is why moderate income housing units are an opportunity to offer rental and homeownership options to people who live and or work here in the county at a price that is more affordable than market rate pricing.
I didn't hear probably closely enough. The figure you gave for a teacher, is that the average?
That's a first-year teacher under the Kerwin blueprint.
And what would it be for somebody, say, at 5 or 10 years teaching in the county?
It depends if they have a master's degree and things. I believe it goes up into the 80s and the 90s, but I always keep track of that first year salary. But I believe it goes into the 80s and 90s.
It's a bit unusual for somebody who's a first-year teacher, come right out of school, to be buying a house.
Well, first year in Howard County, so
Okay.
I think they will come from other places. But even renting at $65,000 a year, if you have student loans and cars and maybe a child, the rents are just unaffordable.
So let's do it, thank you. So, and definitely, please stay. So thank you for saying you were unsure and explaining why. Let's go into the yes with consideration. The folks who answered the yes with considerations, what are some of the considerations that you wanted to? You'd like to say this is a lot easier when I share.
I mean, I think it's a variety of things, you know. we flipped the questions, but the question of the master developer and all of this seems important to this conversation. But a big one for me is just size of potential and redevelopment, or potential new developments and redevelopments. And how much of that is there in Columbia? It's, you know, a or unit, small subdivision and a little parcel of land, like, you know, there are some complications with that. And also just thinking more creatively about, you know, Columbia was successful at creating a variety of housing opportunities. How do we enhance that aspect of Newtown so that allows for a diversity of housing types, size?
Yeah, and Ian, that's something that came through in several of the homework assignments and several of the homework responses was the consideration for redevelopment areas only, or looking at it of exactly that, how do we identify, because there already is this, like, there was such a legacy, and that was one of the comments up there was such a legacy of mixed housing to begin with. So is it strengthening that rather than the MIHU? So thank you for sharing that. Others who answered with yes with considerations. Somebody else who answered that want to share what those considerations were?
I would say with diversity in terms of where these homes are located, so they're not all in areas that are already populated. I'd also like to see that they not all be apartments or condos. So that they're diverse in terms of type of homes.
So the consideration of in location needs or something to the effect of this middle income housing, but not all condos, not all apartments, spreading it out throughout the district. Consideration.
I didn't get to answer this. I don't know that I would have answered yes with considerations. I would have answered probably no, because it does seem like a lot of the affordable housing is already located in Columbia. But I also, I have a question, because Columbia is supposed to be balanced. We're supposed to have, we'll call it affordable low-income housing, and then medium-income housing, and high-income housing, and everybody exists in a village together, right, with this housing, with a low-income housing surrounding the village center to make amenities as available as possible. River Hill doesn't have any low-income housing. And my understanding also is that Miller's Grant doesn't have any MIHUs. And can you, like, where are we putting these MIHUs? Because it just seems to me that, as Sharon made the comment, and I agree with her, is it feels like we're concentrating a lot of MIHUs in areas that are already struggling to support people that they already have. So are there places that just get out of having MIHUs? And what about Erickson Living? I've also heard that we won't be able to enforce the MIHUs in that area either. It's gonna make that unaffordable for seniors. But not middle of the country anyway.
So continuing care retirement communities, which is Miller's Grant and Erickson, are very challenging for the moderate income housing unit program. Both have a requirement. The requirement at Miller's Grant is 29 units. There are less than 12 that are occupied by moderate income housing unit residents because of the entrance fee of almost $500,000. So someone who can afford the moderate income housing unit rent who qualifies does not have the $500,000 entrance fee. Erickson will be in a similar boat. We will have 120 moderate income housing units at the Erickson project over about a 10-year period, because there's going to be 1,200 units. People don't have the 700,000 plus to pay the entrance fee. So while we can offer units at MIHU rents in Erickson and at Miller's Grant, how do we get people in? Both have created subsidy funds to help pay the entrance fee for moderate income residents, but it's not enough. $5 million at Miller's Grant will not get 29 people in the door. $5 million in Erickson will not get 120 people in the door. People have to have a home that they can sell to be able to pay the entrance fee, and then based on their income, qualify to pay the lower MIHU rent. So that's the continuing care retirement community. MIHUs are based on zoning. The zoning requirements dictate whether MIHUs are required or not. It applies only to new development. So if something is being built and it is in a zoning district that requires MIHUs, then the developer is required to provide them, or there are opportunities for alternative compliance.
What's alternative compliance?
Alternative compliance can be paying a fee in lieu. And that is 99% of the time done for single-family detached homes. It is not allowed for townhomes, condominiums, or apartments.
Why do we allow it for single family?
It is a code provision.
And also just to my nice, so Karen, in every residential district, MIHUs are required except for in the Newtown area. So Newtown, we don't have an MIHU requirement. All the other residential districts we do. The reason we have the optional fee and lieu provision in a lot of our single family districts are because even if you're building one new home, you have an MIHU. You can't build 20% of one unit, so you have to do a fee and lieu. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We had discussions many years ago before instituting to allow a fee in lieu, whether we would only require MIHUs in communities of 10 units or more. And the council did not select that option. They wanted an MIH requirement across the board for all residential development in the zone that requires it. But then, again, as Linda said, if someone's building one unit, how do they give us 10 or 15% affordable units? So we had to come up with something that money comes to the Department of Housing for us to support the homeownership and rental programs that the department has.
Thank you.
Others who said yes with consideration for two, anyone else want to share? And then those who said no, what was your rationale for the no?
So the phrase that I've been using when I talk to people about this, is I want housing to be affordable, but I don't necessarily want affordable housing. And I say that because it seems pretty clear that the more rules and regulations that you add, requirements for the housing that you want to build in, disincentivizes housing being built. And disincentivizing housing being built means less of it, which means higher prices over time. I mean, it's supply and demand. So that's the phrase I like to use. I want housing to be affordable, not necessarily want affordable housing. So that's
It also creates a monolithicness if there is such a word. I mean, there's not a lot of outside investment in Columbia. Take it from a guy that's invested in downtown. There's only 2 or 3 of us, and it's just so hard. It's swimming upstream, it's gasping for air in a room with very little oxygen being consumed by just a certain group. And I'm telling you that it's bad for Columbia. Impose more and more restrictions. It's better to let the free market decide. I mean, we own a piece of land that's really unique, and it's starving to be redeveloped. But to impose something based on our initial investment and how much we put into it and everything to now impose this afterwards, it would torpedo, of course.
Anyone else to share their thoughts?
I just wanted to pull up, there was a distribution, in one of your things, there was a distribution of housing, and it looked like it was pretty even between high income, middle income, and low income. Already. It's one of the early slides. There was it was percentages. It was like at the bottom left-hand corner or something, you had some percentages, and it was approximately 30, 30, 30. That wasn't exactly it, but.
Might have been a mix of types, but.
Was it mix of types?
Yes, that was early on.
Oh, this one, housing.
Next one down.
Oh, yeah, that's where I've got 30, 30, 30. It's not quite that much.
Yeah, 38, 27, 35.
I just wanted to see it again. It was significant to me, because there's already a pretty good mix from what that suggests to me anyway.
So if we go back to your question or your comment regarding, kind of if we impose a restriction or impose another, I guess, requirement, so to speak. But what if, for instance, we have MIHs, so one of the things HOKA by Design contemplates in the Housing Opportunities Master Plan is incentivize. So what if something regarding MIHUs, or if you were to the ability to have density bonuses or some type of other incentive?
Yeah, if there was a way to compensate, somehow. And when we build LPS, this is the way I think it should work. We volunteered to go into it. We were, you guys probably know, we were outside of the new zoning because of the WCI thing. And we had volunteered to, and it might not have been 15%, but we had volunteered for like 10%. And I don't want to go into details of why it ended up not, but it wasn't.
I'm just
volunteer, but,
the
the
incentivizing.
market conditions work, and I think that it's better when the community and the developer work together to come up with what's best. And I think that it does bring out the best in people when you're working together rather than,
Right, so I think that would be one of the things, with the MIHUs is, what if they're incentivized to hit a certain target?
Yeah.
And that incentivization could be, bonus density, lesser parking requirements.
Sure.
Other things that we have the ability, obviously stormwater management, forest conservation are fixed things,
Yeah.
not to say.
No, I like
But there
that.
could be other types of things that could be done within the consideration of zoning
Sure.
to incentivize MIHUs and even LIHUs.
Conceptually, right, it's a great idea, right? I mean, what I think doesn't work is having all of the units all jammed together, because I don't think it provides access for people to get, to improve their lifestyle. But I do think that, when it's working like you're describing, that, within the rising of the tide, that all people go with it. So something like that, I think would be great. I just don't think with the position, I mean, we've already paid the money, we've already made the investment, and it's tough to.
There's something that I think, Brian, you might have mentioned it, and David, you did as well, and it's, I've served on different task forces myself, for the state of Maryland as well, with managed accessory dwelling units, a couple of other things. And comment that was made is something very important, and that's just important in everything that we're looking at here, is the more requirements for the more levels, the more costly things are to develop and redevelop.
Well, and the harder that people work to get around it. And
Well,
we
yeah.
all know that.
There's that side of
people
it too.
become experts at getting
Yes.
around these things, and it's the dumb guy like me that just follows the rules that really feels strongly about it. A lot of people figure out a way around it.
And so and that really came up a lot in the accessory dwelling unit conversations I've had, is that the more things you put onto it, you turned it away from being this something that allows multi-generational housing in a great format, and you've made it so expensive to do. So that is definitely something in everything that we're looking at, keeping that in mind of what does that expense become as we're looking through everything. From the person who wants to make a change on their home to a developer who's coming in to want to put a new development or redevelopment in. So we've got, what I want to do, unless there are any.
One thing, there's
Absolutely.
a whole market out there for people that have made a whole lot more money than I would ever dream of making, of how to take these affordable housing things and make a ton of money on them. They've just become experts at how to take the rules and benefit from them. So the rules aren't always the best thing.
Any final comments on this? And as I said, we're going through these to have these conversations to see if there's additional information. And in the recommendations, we'll come back to each of these and say, here was this consensus we came to in the task force, and let's just confirm. We'll bring additional information. Does that change any minds? Does that, when we look at this as the actual recommendation, what does that recommendation look like? Is it in fact, maybe there are considerations, or it might come back and to Karen, to your point, there's a great mix out here already. Do we need to take a look through the zoning, section 125, and ensure that strengthens so it doesn't change within that?
Can I ask my question that I wanted to ask earlier too, when we said that the zone, when Greg made the comment that the zoning is set in stone, everybody got really upset about that, but we have restrictive covenants on our land. And I don't see how we can have this conversation about the zoning without talking about the covenants that we all have. You know, and it's not just about what color you can paint your house, it's about what you can do with the properties that we have here in Columbia. And those don't change, and I'm not sure that that development that Howard Hughes, when they built all those things in downtown Columbia, didn't necessarily violate the covenants that were down there. You know, we have, our village centers are zoned to be commercial. A lot of people wanna come in and build housing in our village centers. So I don't understand how the zoning isn't tied to the covenants and vice versa, and we seem to be refusing to have that conversation.
Can I add, I've become sort of a covenant expert here in the past few years. When you guys talk about covenants, it would help me if you would elaborate. There's all kinds of covenants. There's general covenants, there's special provisions, there's parking covenant that I'm familiar with. What covenants are you talking about?
I'm
Do you know?
I'm talking about the overall system of covenants, like an interlocking mosaic, if you will, that covers all of Columbia, vertically and horizontally, which enabled Mr. Rouse to say to us all those years ago, first time I ever heard the term NIMBY was from Mr. Rouse's lips. You will never have to be concerned because it is all preordained and in the scheme of development. So when you take the partnership between the county and HRD and add in the covenants and the scheme of development, I'm hearing it from my friend John Healy, whom I know you know, who sat at Mr. Rouse's knee,
Yeah.
wrote the covenants, implemented them all, and he's a real property lawyer. He's one of a half a dozen lawyers who was asked by the American Bar Association to form the College of New Property Lawyers. And I know it's a narrow and distinct area of the law, but it takes its roots from, as I understand it, all the way back to the Magna Carta. And once these things are established, they cannot be changed. I brought up early on twice in our sessions about the possibility of having John come and talk to us. 2.5 months ago, I submitted the information on how to reach John to people running the task force, and nothing has happened. It's been memory hold. And I think that, you know, even beyond the covenants, if we want future generations of people who live in Columbia and Howard County to understand what they've got here, we ought to be going back to the basics. We should be going back to see what Charlie Miller and the commissioners did and why they, looking at the foundation for why, you know, that was the view that they wanted for this county, and they did it legislatively, and they mandated the covenants to Mr. Rouse. Had no choice. If we didn't have the covenants, we would have no Columbia.
I would just have to, to understand what you're saying with regard to covenant. I'd have to know which covenant specifically you're referring to.
And the way to do that would be to bring John in here and let him have a session with all of us.
So with that, to that same point, there are
They run with the land.
there are many different covenants. We've touched on them briefly. One of the things that, just in the explanation of where they fit within the different pieces, definitely hearing that, I think that's something we'll take back and look at again. One of the overarching, what we want to do at this time is just, what is that not the recommendation. Do we think it's the right thing to do? Because the fact of saying that everything's stuck in stone, even laws have changed. So I think that's something of, we're not putting that out there. We're saying, hey, we think this is the right thing to do, and, or not, you know, it might or might not be, but if it is, then that is definitely where then the Department of Planning and Zoning digs into, well, how do we make that happen?
But the covenants run with the land. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. So like my house,
Move on, please.
Michael, could you one time in your life not be so rude?
I've been waiting for 5
People-
minutes. We
people have
spent about 2 hours on covenants
No,
over
we
the course of
haven't.
this task force,
No, we haven't.
and it's gibberish.
No, we haven't, and it's not gibberish. And when someone, you know, one day the covenants will serve you, and I wish you the best. So the covenants run with the land, and the zoning overlays the covenants. And the covenants can't be changed unless the residents, as a body, everyone in Columbia would have to reject the covenants if you want to get rid of them. So when you say we're gonna make all these recommendations about new town zoning, if you're gonna recommend something, you need to know whether or not that violates the covenants that are on that land. And to say that, oh, laws change over time, well, the covenants run with the land.
And just, and I saw 2 hands come up, so I'll make a comment, we'll go to these 2 hands, and in the interest of time, we do have 2 more questions to get through. So we will go to that, and we certainly have the ability to come back as we're talking through recommendations. So one of the items when we talk about what does that mean to make the recommendation, whether that is we want it to change, we don't want it to change. Yes, covenants, and they can be changed. And there's organizations out there, if you go into, and I know Columbia is not West Baltimore, very much aware of that. But in West Baltimore, there is a group coming in from Chicago to redevelop Edmondson Village Shopping Center. And in order to do that and to put different things in there, they have to go through and talk to all the neighbors there to get them to sign off on the covenants. So it is something, but they can be changed. And it does take that, it takes education. And when we talk about the recommendations, what we're looking for from this group is, do we think it's the right thing to do? If we think it's the right thing to do for that future vision of Columbia, then we say that, and that the recommendation out of this group is that we think it's the right thing to do. And it is gonna have to come into effect with covenants, it's gonna have to come into effect with zoning. But that's where that next step out of here is then it goes to Department of Planning and Zoning, and they say, okay, so this task force thinks the right thing to do is this. First of all, we're going out to the community anyway. We have another public meeting where they're gonna weigh in as well. If everyone there is saying, yeah, we agree with that. So then that next step in the process is, well, if we need to do this, and we are gonna make a change to the covenants, then there's gonna be an entire process of going out to the community members, asking for their weigh in, asking for them to sign off on it. So that's where that piece of it of not discarding the covenants, but recognizing that becomes a piece of a process, might be a really big piece of it, as you've noted.
It's
very
huge.
large
Every
piece of it.
lot owner in Columbia will want to condemn the covenants if you want to read it. You want to change it. So it's not.
Yes, that's not quite how covenants
That's
work,
not
but
But
Yeah.
I did say, we'll go to Joan and then we'll go to Matt and then we'll move on to the next one. We'll come back to these topics and recommendations, but we do want to check for other topics as
I
well.
have a completely different question, and I'd like to request that, Kelly, the numbers that you provided to us regarding how many units you have total since 1997, and the breakdown, similar to what we got from Jeff, but the breakdown as to what the average costs are of the rental units and of the ownership units, and how much money you have to make to be able to afford those things. If you could provide just a little thing to us,
So we have an annual report that I can send to Jeff, that he can send
that
out
would
to
be
the
great.
group.
Thank you. Because your numbers surprised me.
Okay, good.
So just to me, it kind of seems like we're all kind of agreeing on the same thing in a different way. You're saying covenants are important, so we can't change them. But we're saying we can't change them, so they're not important to us. Because we have no, you're right, we cannot touch the covenants because they are literally between HRD and the landowners. It's a private agreement, which I've brought an example of here if anyone would actually read them. It just says, this is what you agree to for the uses of your land. This is who, maintains the architectural review rights. All building height limitations, how to get rid of your trash. It's all in an actual document and they can be changed by property. It's not an overall Columbia covenant, it's property to property. And they even expire, this one expires in 2050. I mean, they all expire in different times. So some don't expire, some
Some can be found obsolete.
can be found obsolete.
Well, that is one of the ways that you
So-
test the covenants as you go to court.
That's in the commercial world, where over and above
Yes.
the regular covenants, you've got the private agreements, so that the utilization of the building, what you're doing, doesn't conflict with anything that Russ is doing.
Exactly, so any changes we recommend, by definition, cannot impede upon the new town covenants, otherwise they won't be implemented by the county council.
Well, I'm not so sure.
That's gonna,
One,
do you want us to move on?
I know, super quick.
If you can take 5 seconds.
But, okay, there was a memorandum of understanding in 2016 that HRD entered in which it agreed with the county to actually modernize the covenants. It was supposed to go and talk to a variety of people.
You guys.
Yeah, I don't know if that happened.
Well, I'm still waiting on it.
So obviously, we know that this question keeps coming up. The one thing that we need to make sure of is that we keep thinking about it of what do we think is the right thing to do? And as we get into these recommendations, if we don't forget the fact that we're here to make these overall recommendations, and the Department of Planning and Zoning are the ones that are gonna have to look into it more in depth. And that every recommendation that's made may not be implemented, because it might come back to exactly that. It's a very large topic, but we still wanna recognize, what does this task force think is the right thing to do? I'll just really quickly, Kelly, on your way out, thank you so much for being here. And we'll look at getting that report. Okay, thank you. So lots of great discussion. Knew that would be what, we know all of these are hot topics. That's why they're here. That's why we're talking about them. So the next one we're gonna talk through is reviewing the density cap. So should we amend the density cap of 2.5 dwelling units per acre across the entire district? This next question actually came out of the public meeting. I had several individuals come and talk to me of, what about, do we regulate it, whether it's by village, by area? Should we consider regulating density by village as well? And so that's something that it wasn't part of the homework. This did come out because that's this process, is we are listening to everyone. So it could very simply be, nope, that's entirely too challenging. I know when I was sharing with Sarah, talking about this, it was like, I mean, if that's the direction, we're gonna have to really take a look at what those formulas are. But if that's the direction that is the right way to go, then we'll figure that out as well. So getting into that, I do want to just share the conclusions from the homework cases. And this really is, again, that question came through. You can see here, this is very much across the board of yes with considerations, no, of course, being the largest response, and onshore. And some of the key takeaways were, would like to understand how ADUs fit within this. How does an accessory dwelling unit fit within the density cap? Should it fit within the density cap? What does that mean? How does that impact it? And that's a very, very good question to ask. Increase the density cap. So this was kind of a combination of responses. So yes, increase the density cap, or identify specific areas for higher density, not just Newtown district-wide. Which that response coming in, ironically, came in the homework assignment and then was backed up by some of the conversations with individuals. There was an acknowledgement that as we talk about wanting more transit in Columbia, transit does require increased density. And in fact, there are formulas from the Federal Transit Administration of how much density you need for bus system, for light rail. I don't think we're ever talking heavy rail here because it's really not good investing in that unless it's an expansion of the current system. And then there was remove the cap altogether. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah to walk through the backup information, and then we'll get into the discussion again.
Wires here. So for those of you that were at the public meeting, this might look a little familiar. This is close to the board that was up. The next slide is actually the exact board that was up. But Newtown regulates density in a couple different ways. So they kind of work like layers, but Your first way that you might be familiar with is Newtown has these minimum and maximum land use requirements. So looking at our land uses, we have a 10% minimum for the entire Newtown area for single family low density. And you can see on the PDP, our research division tracks this, so we're at 10.3% right now. For medium density, we've got a 20% minimum, we're at 21.2. And then apartments, which is actually a topic for our next meeting, can be both single family attached, so townhomes or multi-family units. So that's a total 13% maximum for all of those apartment uses. We're at 12.1%. Of course, you've got our 36% open space, we're at 37, and employment, we're at 18.8%. So this is the board you might have seen at a public meeting. The other ways that we regulate density is by the exact use and then for the Newtown district overall. So for each of these uses, there's a maximum density. So you can see for townhomes, that's 10 units per acre, single family medium density, that's 4 units per acre. And then across the entire Newtown district, that's 2.5 units per acre. So when you're looking at the density, you're really looking at different math at different scales. You might be looking at a small neighborhood level for, say, a single family medium density to meet that 4 units an acre. And then when you get to the 2.5 units an acre, you're really doing the math over those 14,000 acres. So it looks a little bit different. So similarly, looking at it by village, you can see downtown Columbia is obviously much denser than the other villages. And then we've got a variety of densities by village, ranging from 6s up to 9, depending on the village. Often that can go along with size of homes, the age it was built, all that. If you compare that to our different zoning districts in the county, that's still pretty like middle of the road. Similar to that mix of housing types you saw where we have like a third, a third, a third. That kind of makes sense with being right in the middle of the zone. So same here. Here's your third, third, third. It's like like Newtown is right here. So we have a pretty even mix. The green is single family, is apartments. Single family attached is the blue and detached is the yellow. So Newtown has a pretty good mix. So then comparing that with some of our other case study communities. In West End, they manage it similarly to Newtown. They have a max cap of 13 persons per acre. So they don't do dwelling units, they do persons. But then they have dwelling units per acre / persons per acre for each of the land uses. And their master plans, which you can see on the next slide, regulate that out similar to the PDP. We have for different areas, and all of it has to meet that 13 persons per acre. Then looking at Montgomery Village, it kind of ends up in a similar way where they have the Euclidean zoning. So that base zoning, you have the density for each. So they've got townhouse low density, medium density, and high density. So it's almost like you're keeping the density by the use, but you're removing that overall 2.5 or whatever it is over the entire area. You're just focusing in on smaller areas. And then for our next one, Greenbelt actually created an overlay district called their neighborhood conservation overlay. They basically translated all the existing densities onto that. So it kind of ends up working the same way as Montgomery Village, where different neighborhoods have different density requirements. And you can see this work out on the aerials a little bit. So Columbia, you can see there's that big mix. So if you're considering it a big scale, you still get 2.5 units an acre. Greenbelt, you can see how it had those different areas on the map of different densities. So this is an area that's 9 units per acre in this small kind of circle. You can see that's multi-family buildings, and on the right, that's 4 dwelling units per acre, so it's a little bit more expanded on. And then again, Reston, you see a lot of similar different mixes. So they've got their 13 persons per acre instead of 2.5 units, so it's a little bit denser than Columbia. And then Montgomery Village, similar to Greenbelt, has the different areas, so it's focusing on a smaller scale. It's similar to the form.
Once you scan this, the first question, actually, I need to change the questions so you can get to it. Scan it there.
Hold on, I'll forget. She still needs. Let me scan again.
Don't think the answers really fit for this question.
Yes, go now, right?
Yeah, not on your.
It's preserve, strengthen, enhance, and transform, but it's kind of a yes or no question.
I think you can only use the P or the N. It's either preserve or transform.
That's a yes or no.
Okay.
Finish your yes or no. Yeah, and some of it was almost the consideration, but really that second question we'll get to, so we'll do that in a moment. So either from this question, should we amend the density cap? Correct, thank you. It would preserve it or transform it, and then when we get into the, what about perm density, we're just gonna discuss them.
If mine says, please wait for the presenter to change slides.
You have this one still, the should we amend? Yeah, we're gonna talk about it first and then I'll change the slide and we'll get to the second question on it. So for those, we have one who says strengthen. Whoever has said strengthen, would you like to share the rationale behind strengthen? As far as those who say yes, transform it, what are some of the thoughts from people who said yes to transform it? Joan?
So I attended all four of the public sessions, and they really got me thinking about density in a lot of different ways. And I actually sent a bunch of questions to Sarah, which she kindly answered, regarding density. And we have this, what I see is an artificial number at this point, the 2.5, and all kinds of gyrations are gone through by staff for the past 50 plus years to keep track of the density. And, you know, we have parts of what's Columbia, like Dorsey Search. Half of Dorsey Search isn't even counted in the densities. And then, you know, we did count the densities that we added at the Village Center, Wild Lake. And we're adding a density that is from Enterprise. We've added densities, something. We don't count ADUs in the density. We're not counting the density in downtown except in a different way. And the most important thing to me is the fact that while Columbia has been carefully keeping track of the density, how many units per acre, we have all of this, all of the holes, if you will, all of the out parcels that have developed under Euclidean zoning using the underlying zone classification. And you know, there should be, I feel like the whole density thing at this point for residential, let me be clear, for residential has outlived its original purpose. And that there can be ways to add density thoughtfully, not in every neighborhood, by using the existing FDPs and without having to keep this artificial number that is counted here but not here and in this and that. I feel like we're bending over backwards for something that 60 years in isn't quite the way to move forward.
And just to clarify, but to add on, as you noted, these holes in here. So keep in mind, Columbia is everything that's in this dashed outline here. And then all these pieces in between it, as you note, Newtown zoning is not the same as Columbia. So not all of Columbia is within that Newtown zoning district. We just wanted to remind all of us of that because we do use the terms interchangeably quite a bit. So that's referring to kind of everything that's not shaded in. So thank you. Others you said to transform. Mike.
I want my kids to be able to afford to own home when they grow up, and house prices will be out of control here if we don't add more homes. So that's why I want the density cap to go up.
Ryan, and then Tim, I saw your hand after.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I have much more to add Joan's statement, because I agree basically completely. I was the one that said move the cap on the homework, mostly because I don't know how you pick a number. It seems very arbitrary. And I agree completely. Over here saying we need more housing, say that earlier. Save a few more time.
You probably will.
And I just want to say, I mean, if you think about, you know, the master plan process with Mr. Rouse and all that was back in the sixties and seventies. Cars look different, the way people move differently. Now, I mean, we've seen a transformation. People don't have 3, 4, 5 kids anymore. I mean, let's work for that. But now we have, you know, if you look at younger people, they're looking for different type of housing. They're going to be a little bit more transient. And I think this is, we've lived past our time with this, you know, 25 acre, whatever, units per acre. It's just time to change and evolve. And new housing is so important because this area is going to grow. I mean, our area is going to grow quickly, even though we're losing government jobs right now, but it is projected to almost double in the next 10, 15 years. And it'd be great to bring some younger people in and find affordability for not only teachers, I also like CA employees, folks who, you know, work more in the, you know, important service jobs. It's unaffordable here. I know it's less expensive in Columbia than the rest of the county, but I have to go outside the county.
It's good to have some ownership because a lot of it's been built just been purely rental.
Exactly.
And there's a destabilization that goes along with that. That I think is bad for Columbia. I've seen it.
So for those who said, oh, did you?
Yeah, when thinking about adding density, if you're gonna add any density, it should be where you need it. And that should probably be in village centres, really is struggling. But that comes not only to enhance the village centre, you've got to make sure no other types of commercial land is opened up, like turning parkways into Rockville Pikes or so-called urban boulevards. So I think if you're going to take the density, maybe you should be able to shift it around so you can make more density around the village centres. You know, hopefully they're more successful.
Brian, you answered the second question, but I do want to, and we'll get to that, and that's a great thought as well. I do want to make sure, so we talked about the strengthen and the transform. So for one or two who said preserve, what was the thought process behind the preserve?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about adding density because I live in Oakland, the village of Oakland Mills, and I see the number of trailers that behind our schools. And when I was doing a lot of the research and reading back newspaper articles from when Rouse was talking to the county commissioners, one of the things that I did not know this, I went to Oakland Mills High School. I was in the band. I always thought it would be really nice if we had a huge school and we had this amazing band, but we had a small band because we had a small high school. Well, he intentionally did that. He intentionally wanted small schools because he wanted more kids to have an opportunity to be in the band, to be a cheerleader, to run for student government, things like that. And I'm just really concerned right now that we're not providing opportunities for these kids, you know, and that they're in these huge classrooms, in these trailers, and the density right now, I'm not even sure we're taking care of the people that we have here already, let alone adding more in, and we don't seem to be doing a good job.
And so some of that, and I'll just do some paraphrasing because we're also taking notes, even though we have meeting minutes, we're taking notes to make sure we get to recommendations. We're accounting for all of this as well. So some of that of looking at the dwelling units per acre, it's not so much tell me if I'm getting it wrong. It's not so much the concern of how many people, how dense it is, but making sure the infrastructure, whatever that looks like, that density cap, the infrastructure can handle it. And that infrastructure is the schools, the amenities, the transportation systems,
Sewer,
utilities.
water,
Yes.
green spaces. I mean, if you add 100 people in and now they're all using that park, what happens to that park? And I'm not saying I don't want them in the park. I love parks, but that's the kind of thing that we take a lot of pride here in Columbia, is that we have a lot of green space. The kids can go pick up a ball and run around, play a pickup game of soccer, baseball, basketball, whatever. But now you're putting a lot more stress on those systems, right?
So I want to just make sure, because again, it's how we always ask questions, right? Sometimes it's yes or no, but then that yes or the no is, well, if we make sure that the balance happens, then it's not necessarily don't change it, but it's a maybe, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, which is why I'm trying to paraphrase this, but the concern is if we are to change it, yes or no, that's a big if. It has to be managed to still have the quality of life.
Or we could go out and buy more land. That acreage.
I'd just like to point out that even if we do vote to increase the density, any new development would still be subject to APFO tests. So that's school tests, road tests, and then overall housing allocation tests. So this wouldn't even actually create development right away. That being said, I don't know how the ADUs work. If those are permitted by right and you could just put those in. I don't know if anybody knows that.
State used legislation, the state just passed a law, that went into effect October 1st. So there was a question going back to the density calculations, and the state law actually says that they cannot be considered in your density calculation, so accessory dwelling units cannot be calculated for that. And then, so what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, so real quick, there were two parts. So accessory dwelling units can be a separate, it depends how different agencies are going to define it. It can be that it convert your garage into an apartment, convert your shed into an apartment, put not your shed. Something that meets all of the quality of life standards and the life safety standards. Put a small structure or even converting your basement or, an area. A lot of the ideas behind accessory dwelling units did come from looking at multi-generational housing. How do you, have different people, living, as we heard earlier, it's $700,000. There might be affordable housing or the moderate income housing units put on senior care, but it's the buying that is prohibitive. So that's what an accessory dwelling unit can be. It's going through state legislation, it's continuing on through county legislation. So I saw you turn around and ask, so I wanted to offer that for everybody. And then you had asked two questions and Linda was answering those.
The first one was the density concern. What was the second question?
Just when you want to put an ADU, is it subject to APFO tests? Okay.
Yeah, that's not how,
Are there a lot of these things?
pardon me?
Are there a lot of them?
Well, currently there are none, right?
Well, we
There's
allow, accessory dwelling units, in most of our districts. But the state law that just passed and that went into effect, October 1st requires that they be allowed in every single family that work. In districts where single family, residential housing is allowed.
But none of them exist.
We do, we
Oh.
have lines, we allow them internal, attached, shared by common law, we do not currently have detached, in our code, but, we were putting forward legislation that we were doing a switch our planning board a couple weeks ago.
So I did move on to the next question, it's very similar, and Brian, you were kind of answering with your comment before, should we amend the density cap across villages? And maybe let's talk about this, of should we amend the density cap differently in different areas? So should it be, and I think Brian, you said it very well, maybe it should be a different consideration at a village center versus something else.
Yeah,
So,
but just to go back to what Joan said, that you can amend the FDP to something different. If we also brought back a comprehensive sketch plans for the different areas, they could be the guidelines of what you do as you redevelop, along with the design guidelines that
It's the same website.
yeah,
Sure, I can.
How do you get?
it's the same exact one here, let me switch screens for a quick moment. There, so that same.
There's the code, okay.
We're getting time.
Jennifer, the code is also on the top there, just under the Microsoft Edge thing when you're on the other side. I had to guess with one number. So.
You put it back up, I missed it.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. All right. So and this is it, because we had the yes, no's before, and then this says, you know, should it be across the villages, or as Brian noted, maybe it's going back to that comprehensive stash plan. So that's the yes with consideration. Is there any, which is a resounding yes? We do have some no's. On the yes with considerations, just want to hear from like maybe one or two people from a timing perspective. Michael.
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure I understood the question. There's a lot of ways to interpret that. Mine is a yes to say like, yeah, at the village level, there should be a density cap, but not that there should be a different density cap for each village. But just that if you have it for the entire district, the density is gonna all end up in a couple select places, and then you should have the density cap at a more local level so that.
Anyone else from the considerations? And thank you for that clarification. Heard from Brian. So what we're gonna do is, looking at the time, we knew there was a lot of information to pack in tonight, and we wanna make sure all of the questions really get vetted through.
I was a no vote.
Oh, yes.
I was a no vote because I don't think the question was exactly right. In that I don't think that the density in Hickory Ridge should be X and the density in River Hill should be Y. I don't think that's right because each village is completely unique in both the layouts of their villages, the current, how many units of each kind are in the villages. I think that there needs to be more finesse to how the density caps are managed. Brian's point about the village centers which has already been identified in HOCO by design as this is a place that we should put more density. And, that makes sense. But I don't want to see one village get all of everything. But I don't think officially staying by village, I think that there needs to be some other finesse to it, maybe by FDPs. Even though we have 200 and some FDPs, many of them are similar. And maybe there's something within those FDPs that would be a way to manage density rather than putting it as each of the 10 villages.
Okay. And I think that also pairs well with this Michael was saying, not different per village center, like that should be looked at, so you're not getting this disparity across.
We voted differently and said the exact same.
Which is very interesting. So
I heard that too.
Should we get into the other question?
well, and that's what I'm gonna say, because I'm looking with our time, we are at 7:47 and we do commit to the 8 p.m. One of the things with the initial schedule, let me go back to that.
That's why I'm here.
Well, you-
So I was particularly interested in the last one.
I know. I'm making sure everybody is interested in that one as well.
It's incentive to come to the next.
I thought this was the last one.
Yeah.
No, December,
Oh, okay, all right,
first time.
okay. Well, wrong out.
Yeah, so I'm gonna see, there's lots of stuff here. All right. Give me one moment and then there we go. Let me come to this. So one of the things we did with the schedule initially is we do have the November meeting. That's it. We're in October. That November meeting is the WebEx, and then December is an in-person. So this December meeting, so we planned this initially that we thought these would be some very robust conversations, because we know that they are. And so we had planned that this has the ability to overlap as well, but it's not, we're gonna come exactly to the end and then move all into recommendations. And part of that was, you do the best laid plan, but if conversations go And there's a lot of great points, there's a lot of education on some of these to be able to decide. We knew that some of these questions would have to move
I
along.
think it's important that the role of the petitioner be an in-person discussion. We need to really understand what happens, and it's a big one.
So, and you don't think our WebEx meetings have that same?
So in person,
Okay,
entities should be here.
Yeah,
all right.
The CA president.
We can certainly, I mean, we
that
would.
needs open discussion, face to face, really, I think. So,
Yeah.
I think that's something important to take into account and definitely wanting all of our task force members here. But I do want to just note we will be, and this is every other month. So we're on WebEx next month, we're in person in December. So that's something that I don't want to start that now because we clearly don't have enough time for a really good conversation about it. And there are some things. We've had folks ask, can you explain who has zoning authority before we get into the original petitioner? So we have some of that information as well, and we don't want to cut that short.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is just go back to the next homework assignment, and kind of go back. We are still going to talk about the question of the original petitioner. That's not going away. It's still part of these major questions. And what we can do is talk about order of things, because we do have the next one being virtual, the one after that being in person. So we can talk about that order. But let me now go backwards. And really, let's talk about the next homework.
can you share the vote though? There was a vote wasn't there a vote on the?
I'm curious too, for the homework.
I can certainly share the homework information, and then here we go. So from the conclusions from the homework cases, should the role of the original petitioner change? And you can see half saying yes, yes with considerations, and then onshore. So there were no votes on this. Of the comments that came through, it was needing more information. The consideration to identify an entity to be the keeper of the plan, and that came through, and I kind of summarized that from one assignment. That thought process came through on several of, there needs to be an entity somewhere that is managing what this plan is, so that it's not just everybody's developing.
Can I just make a comment on this?
County.
Right, work, so I'm finish going through these bullet points.
We would love that.
One of it was stated in several that the original petitioner is no longer a locally owned company. And so just concern over, is there still that alignment with the local vision? And then there's still a process to go through for changes without the additional steps of an original petitioner conversation. So these were the main kind of summary of the homework assignments, but that's for everybody to see this. Yes, absolutely. And from when we provide this information, because we always provide the PowerPoint after, we'll put this slide in it, and we'll just pull the others so that we can use that when we talk about it next. Brian, you had one thing?
Yes, as we've seen tonight, obviously Newtown has been very successful. The job has been done, with the exception of downtown. The rest of Newtown is finished. The original petitioner has met their obligation, that's the end. New entity should step up, he can go out of town and go wherever he wants to. It should not be Howard Hughes at all. It should be this, whatever it is. And I think the Columbia Association president has got to be here. And we've got to get, or any other entity, and also the other parts of the county, the Department of Licenses, Inspections, and Permits, they have got a role. When you look at the covenants and you look at the design regulations, they're stipulated with some oversight as well. So again, I go back to what I've said right from the beginning. We need every entity clearly defined and what their governance role is. Before, how can we make decisions on this whole thing for 18 months without knowing who's gonna enforce it?
And Brian, that's a great point. You've shared that before. In the slides that we'll go through on here, do you talk about who has zoning authority? Because that's really, as we're talking about this from the perspective of Newtown zoning. And so that has.
But you can't not look at, like we said, covenants, you can't not look at the other entities in that government that also should be doing oversight.
Correct, and we'll go through that when we go through this, and this is why we'll save this and table this for
Why can't we
one
just have the
time.
details now? Why can't you just tell us what it is now, so we know everybody's on the same level playing field?
Because we are running out of time and we
I
want to
don't
have
mean
this
now,
as a
I don't mean now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
At the beginning of the meeting, you've clearly defined what these entities do, because how can everybody make a decision if we've all got different ideas?
And that's exactly, we've heard that comment and so appreciate that input. And that's part of this entire conversation that we do want to have when we discuss it. We want to share, and this will also go out, pull them all up. This will also go out in an email as we had last time, so you'll find this from Jeff. An email from Jeff coming to you, but it's the same idea of those next major topics of should the structure of Newtown district change? Should apartment land use be redefined in the Newtown zoning code? Should there be an expansion of uses, materials, and design guidance in the Newtown zoning code? And should the regulations and processes for development, redevelopment, and or amendment be simplified? This is a lot. You'll get this, so for those, I know some of you are writing them down, some are taking photos, we will get these slides to you, so you'll have this. The other thing that you'll have will be slides that explain what the question is, the element that we're looking at, what those relevant zoning sources are, and where that information already is in your virtual findings. You will have that information to use as well. Just note, we do have, because we had the public meetings last week, this week is our Newtown Task Force. We do have, it's coming up pretty quick for the next Newtown Task Force, so you'll see that this is due November 7th, is when that is. We are meeting on November 18th as our next one. And we'll continue talking about PSAT, we'll be developing recommendations. So November 18th will be virtual. That is still on a Tuesday. In December, will be actually the second Tuesday of the month. It is December 9th. And that will be in person. And we'll send out reminders for everybody, meeting invitations. Yes, that will be, the in-person is here. Getting better, actually. So based on our time, we'll kind of wrap things up. Any last quick comments? Linda, Sarah, Jeff, Kristen, Hannah.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, no problem. We'll be back. Again, thank you, and we look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.